Dead by Daylight's 10th anniversary is just around the bend, and the community's ripe with theories as to just who will be entering the fog this time around. It could be anyone, but two names in particular appear again and again: Jason Voorhees and Pennywise. And I'd have to agree. Unless Chapter 40 is just an original chapter, it almost has to be one of these two licenses. But what if it doesn't need to just be one of them? Before I tackle that theory though, I'd like to start by going over everything that points to Friday the 13th, everything that points to it, and everything that could be applied to either and or points to both. So without further ado, let's get right into it. For starters, let's tackle everything that points to Jason Voorhees being the 10th anniversary killer. I went over some of this in my most recent video, so I'll speedrun a couple of these points. First, the license is fairly active. Jason was added to Fortnite and Call of Duty late last year, not to mention Multiverses in mid-2024. A new show for the franchise called Crystal Lake will start airing in October this year, which will be important later. And a new game is in the works which I feel like was confirmed to not be an asymmetrical, but don't quote me on that. Second, the character who's essentially DBD's poster child, the Trapper, is almost blatantly inspired by Voorhees. Furthermore, right now he's the sole character featured in the game's thumbnail for Steam. This can easily just be attributed to the former point of him being the poster child anyway, but I thought it was worth mentioning regardless. Lastly, Dead by Daylight is a pretty blatant love letter to not just horror, but slasher horror in particular. And Jason Voorhees is inarguably the slasher. I think it'd be fair to say he's been behavior's most wanted killer for the game since its inception. So this iconic character coming in for such a big milestone as the 10th anniversary would be pretty perfect. Though even just a reveal for a future chapter would suffice just as well, which I'll be touching on in a moment. Next, let's go over what points to Pennywise being the new killer this time around. For one, much like Friday the 13th, the license is pretty active right now. Welcome to Derry, a show depicting the earlier days of the Dancing Clown, started airing late last year with a second season already confirmed to be in the works. And for both points 2 and 3, I like to direct everyone's attention to the teaser for the anniversary we got on the 18th. Not only is there a piece of graffiti that may just read Stephen with a crown on top, a nod to Pennywise's creator Stephen King, but there's also a particular emphasis on the word it at the end of the video. I do think this is clearly referring to the entity, as the sentence doesn't make much sense in the context of the clown, but I mean, come on. With just how highly requested this license is for DBD, they have to have known what they were doing here, which transitions well into things that point to both of these iconic horror figures. Obviously, Jason Voorhees and Pennywise are some of the most wanted killers for DBD, nearing the top of every poll, every tournament on the matter. But it's not just the community. Behavior has gone on record saying they want both Friday the 13th and it in Dead by Daylight, and this honor is shared by no other license. Moving back to the anniversary teaser for a moment, there's a 10-digit number that shows briefly before the video starts playing, and when you add all of these digits together, you get the new number of 57. In Jason's lore, 1957 is the year that he drowned in Crystal Lake. Not only this, but that exact same year is also when the original It novel takes place. Actually, according to some sources, it was 1958, and I'm having a hard time figuring out which one is accurate. Either way, close enough. And before I touch on this last point, I need to briefly return to that question I proposed in the intro. What if DBD's 10th anniversary is two killers, both of the characters I've been discussing in this video? While this could happen, I think another idea is much more likely, which I hinted at the end of Jason's section. I think that Pennywise will be Chapter 40's sole killer, and that Voorhees will be Chapter 42's, roughly half a year after the anniversary. This is because Crystal Lake, the aforementioned new show for Friday the 13th, will start airing in the middle of October. And because it'll have 8 episodes, this means it'll continue to air throughout all of November. This month just so happens to be the time a DBD chapter normally releases, and it also just so happens to have a Friday the 13th. With this, I ask you, what better way to handle Jason Voorhees in Dead by Daylight than to reveal him on the game's 10th anniversary and have his chapter come in on a Friday the 13th? Massive shout out to these tweets for those last two ideas, by the way. This video probably wouldn't have been made without them. Now, even with all this said, I would like to remind you all, these are just theories. We could only be getting one or the other. We could be getting both, either as the same chapter or one simply revealed at the same time as the other, actually coming in later, or we could even get neither, which to be honest I think is incredibly unlikely, but anything could happen. And I've already made it pretty clear what I think will, so now I'd like to turn it to you in the comments. What do you think is going to happen? Before I proceed with my usual outro spiel, I'd like to quickly draw more attention to my aforementioned last upload, which goes over 10 killers I think would be amazing in DBD, and one of these just so happens to be Jason Voorhees, so I highly implore you all to check that out. And if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It means a lot and helps way more than you might think. Plus, less than 4% of people who watch my videos are actually subscribed, and I'd love to bring that number up. If you really like the video, there's a pretty good chance you'll like my streams too, which I do over on Twitch as well as an alternate YouTube account. On that note, massive shout out to my Twitch subs, Freedy and Slicks, as well as Standard Swag, currently my only channel member here on YouTube. But regardless, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.